Your dog has learned to read an entirely different species, and they did it without you noticing. Every time your cat flicks its tail and your dog backs away, every time your cat goes still and your dog slows their approach before reaching them. That is not instinct. It is not luck, and it is not an accident of temperament. It is a learned vocabulary that your dog built, word by word, through months or years of close and patient observation. Your cat never taught your dog. You never sat them down together. Your dog figured it out alone, in the ordinary hours of a shared home. That raises a question worth sitting with. If your dog can decode the emotional signals of an animal with completely different communication hardware, a species that uses stillness where dogs use movement, that signals aggression with the same tail position dogs use to signal joy, what does that say about the kind of attention your dog is actually paying to the world around them? Dogs and cats do not share a common signaling language. The research on this is unusually clear. A 2013 study published in Applied Animal Behavior Science examined how dogs and cats interpret each other's tail movements and postural shifts in detail. The findings were stark. The same physical signal carries opposite emotional meanings depending on which species is producing it. A slow, low tail wag in a dog reads as cautious, tentative friendliness. In a cat, that same movement is a marker of active agitation. A warning, not a greeting. These signals do not just differ. They directly contradict each other. A dog approaching a slowly tail-wagging cat with friendly intent is misreading a clear warning as an invitation. Early in any dog-cat relationship, this mismatch is exactly what produces conflict. The dog is not being aggressive or oblivious. The dog is responding to what they genuinely believed they read correctly, using the only interpretive framework they had at the time, their own. But something changes over time in households where both animals remain. Researchers at Tufts University's Cummings School of Veterinary Medicine documented this shift in multi-species households specifically. Dogs who had lived with cats for 6 months or longer showed measurably different behavioral responses to feline signals. They had stopped applying their own species framework as the default and started applying something closer to a cat-specific interpretive map. They had not just learned new information. They had reorganized how they processed it. This is not a small cognitive adjustment. It requires your dog to hold 2 conflicting meaning systems at the same time. Their own instinctive one, built into their development, and a learned overlay that only applies to one specific kind of creature in their environment. Your dog does not do this with squirrels. They do not attempt it with birds outside the window. They did it with your cat and with no other species in their world. That specificity matters enormously. The remapping happened because your cat is part of your dog's social world, not the external, unpredictable world beyond the door, but the intimate inner world of the home. Your dog classified your cat as someone worth the sustained cognitive effort of understanding. The question that follows is what triggered that classification in the first place, and the answer is more precise than most people expect. Subscribe to Baroon. We decode these hidden messages every week, so you never miss what your dog is actually telling you. Here is what the science keeps returning to from multiple independent directions. Your dog did not learn your cat's language by watching your cat in isolation. They learned it by watching your cat and you at the same time. The human variable turns out to be the one that makes the entire process possible. The anchor that converts confusing feline signals into something your dog could begin to map. Studies on social referencing in dogs, the well-documented behavior where dogs look to their owner's face to calibrate how to feel about an ambiguous or unfamiliar stimulus, show that this mechanism extends far beyond obvious threats or food rewards. Your dog watches how you respond to your cat. They register the complete absence of alarm in your posture when the cat hisses from across the room. They register the warmth and ease in your voice when you address both animals in the same breath. Research from Eötvös Loránd University in Budapest, which has produced some of the most granular mapping of dog social cognition in the world, found that dogs use human emotional cues as an interpretive scaffold specifically when processing novel or confusing social information. Your cat's signals were, in the beginning, deeply confusing to your dog. Contradictory, unpredictable, carrying none of the familiar emotional grammar of canine interaction. You were the reference point that gave those signals their first stable emotional weight. Every time you remained calm in the presence of your hissing cat, your dog updated their internal model of what a hiss means in this home. Not consciously, not in any single moment, and not quickly, but persistently, across hundreds of small observations. Over time, your dog built a working emotional map of your cat that was anchored not only in what the cat did, but in how you responded to what the cat did. Your reaction was always part of the data. This is where something important shifts in how you might see the relationship between your two animals. The dynamic between your dog and your cat has never been a straightforward two-way negotiation between them. It has always been triangulated, routed through you. Your dog's capacity to read your cat was built on a foundation of reading you first, and reading you accurately enough to use your responses as a guide to an otherwise unreadable creature. That trust is not passive background noise. Research published in scientific reports in 2020 demonstrated that dogs show measurably elevated cortisol responses, a direct physiological marker of stress, when their owner displays signs of anxiety or tension near a third party, whether animal or human. Your dog is not simply watching your face for information. They are absorbing your emotional state and carrying it into every interaction that follows in your presence. What you feel near your cat becomes part of how your dog approaches your cat. So when your dog learned to soften their approach, to read a flattened ear as a boundary and a slow blink as an opening, part of what they were learning was the emotional register you hold in your own relationship with the cat. Your dog absorbed your relationship with your cat and used it as the raw material for their own. That is not incidental. It is one of the more precise illustrations of how completely your dog is embedded in your emotional life, not just responding to it, but navigating the entire social world of your home through it. Which leaves one thing still unresolved, the thing the science keeps pointing toward but rarely states directly. If your dog's understanding of your cat was built this way, layered and triangulated and anchored in you, what happens to that understanding when your emotional state around the cat changes? When tension enters the household? When routines shift? When the cat becomes ill and your responses to them change in register, in frequency, in the weight you carry into the room? Your dog notices. The behavioral literature on this is consistent across studies. Dogs track changes in owner affect with a sensitivity that researchers continue to find difficult to fully account for through existing models of animal cognition. When your relationship to your cat shifts, even in ways that feel invisible, even in ways you haven't consciously registered yourself, your dog's read of the cat shifts too. Not because the cat changed, because you did, and your dog is always watching. There is something very specific in that. Your dog never learned to understand your cat as a standalone project, a separate puzzle they worked on independently in another room. They learned to understand your cat as an extension of understanding you, as one more layer of the emotional landscape they have spent years reading with more care and precision than most people ever realize. The vocabulary they built is not a transferable skill for decoding cats in general. It is a particular, local, intimate skill tuned to your household, calibrated to your specific responses, assembled in real time around the emotional texture of life with you. Every time your dog reads your cat correctly now, backs off from a flattened ear without drama, approaches a slow blinking cat with ease and without hesitation, they are not just reading the cat. They are drawing on everything they have ever learned about you. The understanding between your dog and your cat was built from the inside of your relationship outward. It always started with you, and it has never stopped being about you.